Hi guys, welcome back to the Gamers Hall. I'm Chris, and today we're going to do another Rules Lawyer video. Going to do a deep dive into how invisibility is supposed to work in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. A lot of these things I've definitely played wrong, I've done wrong, and I've found videos of Jeremy Crawford and some of the things he said and some of these interpretations, and I'll put all of them on screen as I go along talking about them. But let's get into this. So the number one thing is, what is the invisibility condition? One, you become basically heavily obscured to anyone who's trying to look at you, and anyone who's trying to look at you is considered to have the blinded condition if you go by what heavily obscured actually is. So basically they can't target you with spells that require sight. If the spell requires you to see the target, you can't be targeted by those spells. The second bullet point on that is the fact that whoever's invisible has advantage to attack their target, and the people trying to attack the invisible person is going to have disadvantage. So those are the main things. As I've stated in previous videos, if you have See Invisibility, Truesight, Tremor Sense, or Blind Sight, that does not take out that second bullet point. You still have the disadvantage to attack. They're still going to get advantage to attack you. The biggest problem with that is if someone has greater invisibility, or if their invisibility doesn't go away, like with Invisible Stalkers. Those are previous videos, but I have to tie it into this one because this is a deep dive into invisibility. So now let's get into some of the bigger points of how invisibility is supposed to work in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. So how invisibility is supposed to work outside of combat. Now one, it gives you advantage on your stealth checks. So anyone who's going to be rolling for stealth is going to roll at advantage. Now you still need to be pretty stealthy for this, because you know, if you're wearing heavy armor or anything like that, then that's going to cancel out because you're just going to be rolling at a regular die for that. You know, outside of combat, you still need a good stealth when you're doing this. So invisibility helps, but there's a good chance you're still going to be loud, making noise. So having a good stealth is what's going to help a lot with this. In combat, this is probably where the most amount of mistakes were made, and I know me personally, I made a lot of these mistakes. And if you ever get to my video where you see where I threw an invisible stalker at my group, you will definitely see I made a lot of mistakes on this one. It makes combats a whole lot harder if you follow the rules the way I did them versus the way they are supposed to be done. You know, I don't know if this is rules as written because of the way things are worded, but I do know for a fact that rules as intended in combat, if you do not take the hide action while you are invisible, people know where you're at. Or they have a general idea of the 5-foot square that the invisible creature is in. That's where I think the disadvantage on the attacks come into play, because it's like, okay, we know he's generally in this area. And a 5-foot square is actually a pretty big area. I mean, your average room in a house is 10 by 10. So half of that, a person is in that area. So you have a good general idea of where they're at, but basically you know what square they're in. So unless they take the hide action, you know 100% what square that creature is in. And that's something I was playing wrong for a while, because I thought if you were invisible, didn't matter if you took the hide action or not, you did not know where the creature was. It was a guessing game at that point. But no, in combat, you have to take the hide action. This is what makes rogues with invisibility or greater invisibility extremely dangerous, because they can bonus action hide. So if you have greater invisibility on a rogue, they can go up, sneak attack, or ranged attack, sneak attack. They've given away their location, but guess what? They can bonus action hide. And if their stealth is good, you're going to have a rough combat with this person or creature. And that's going to suck. This is something I played wrong for a while, but yes, if you're invisible, unless you actively take the hide action, creatures know where you are because you're making sound. If you're swinging your weapon, that's making a sound. You're wearing armor, that's probably making a sound too. Your footsteps are possibly making sounds. And, you might have a coin purse on you, making sound. If you don't take the hide action, something you are doing is actively making sound and giving away your location. Unless you have some other ability or effects that cause it to where that's not happening. If you were in a zone of silence is where this would be a little tricky, because then you wouldn't be making sound and nobody could hear anything, and that would play a lot differently. But take that out of the equation, yes, no hide action, people know where you're at.
People sometimes forget that invisible is a condition. And there are some important rules built into the invisible condition itself. One of the biggies is that when you're invisible, your attack rolls have advantage, and people's attack rolls against you have disadvantage. This is true even if they know where you are, because as our listeners know, when you're invisible, it doesn't mean you're silent. Like if you really want to make sure people don't know where you are, you need to hide. You make a dexterity stealth check, and you're hoping that they're not only going to not notice any visual trace of where you are, but they're also not going to hear you.
All right. So the other part of this is when you take your hide action while invisible in combat, you're basically hoping that your stealth roll is going to beat their passive perception. And if you can beat their passive perception, you can basically hide anywhere on the battlefield. Passive perception, it's always going. And if you beat it, now people are actually going to have to take their action to try and locate you, or cast a spell like see invisibility or something to be able to see you and find out where you're at, or something like fairy fire and hope that you fail that dexterity saving throw so you'll lose the invisibility condition. These are ways to get around that, but like I said, as long as your stealth is good, you got to beat those passives and hope that nobody has these ways of finding invisible creatures. All right, so now one of the things I want to talk about is the disadvantages of being invisible. And one of those things is that your allies cannot target you to not be a part of their abilities. So if your allies have abilities that say, okay, creatures that you can see aren't affected by this if you designate them. So like, Spirit Guardians, for instance. If you cast the Spirit Guardian spell, you can designate who is unaffected by that. Well, if they can't see you to undesignate you, then you can't undesignate them. So which means they'll be taking that Spirit Guardian damage if they come into effect, or if they go into its area of effect. Another one of the disadvantages to this spell is that if you don't have dark vision and you have a light source on you, a candle, a torch, someone casts the light spell on something you're holding or something you're wearing, or you have a weapon that will shed light, bright light, dim light, whatever. When invisibility is cast on you, even though the item that is creating the light does become invisible, the light does not become invisible. So if you're holding a torch or you have the light spell going and you're invisible, you turn invisible while it's going, well, now you just have this weird effect thing where you're going around, but the light is still traveling and going around the areas. And that's something I didn't know that actually happened. And I'm not sure how many times that ever would have come up, but it is a very interesting thing that happens. This is another thing that I found while doing my research on this, is that if someone's under the effect of the mind blank spell, which stops all divination spells, so if you're under mind blank and then you're invisible, someone with true seeing, it doesn't work against natural true seeing, but if someone casts the spell true seeing, the true seeing that comes from that spell, since it is a divination spell, they will not be able to see the person who cast it. And that's something interesting that I really didn't know about. And granted, we don't really play high level. Our campaigns typically don't go that far or enough for us to come across things of that sort, and that's that's our problem. But it is something I came across that does happen. These are some of the things that I came across while doing my deep dive on how invisibility is supposed to work in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. You know, the hide action matters in combat for invisible creatures, and all these other things I've stated. And I think that was kind of the biggest one. But are these things you guys knew about? Have you guys played any of these wrong? Are you going to rule things this way if it comes across your gaming table? Or are you going to do your own thing? Because, hey, you're the DM. You can do whatever you want and play it however you want at your table. These are just kind of rules as written and some rules as intended as well. But what are you guys going to do? What do you think? Like, comment, share, subscribe, and catch you guys on the next video. Keep having fun at your gaming table.